Welcome to the Nexus Project, a contemporary marketing conversation with John Ghiorso.
Hey everyone, I'm your host, John Ghiorso, and welcome back to another episode of the Nexus Project. So on today's episode, I interview Henry Cowling. Henry is the Chief Innovation Officer at Media.Monks, and he has a fascinating 20-year career in the creative industry. So he's been profiled in The Economist. His work has been exhibited by Banksy. He's served on multiple creative juries over the years, and he sits at the top of our 9,000 person organization focused on kind of all of the converging technologies that impact marketing services today. We focus primarily on AI in this conversation and the profound impacts it's going to have, not only on creativity, but on platforms, on search, on data, and really, frankly, every element of marketing. So I think you're going to get a lot out of this conversation. And without further ado, here we go. All right, Henry, welcome to the show.
John, thanks for having me, man. It's good to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive right into it. AI is kind of the big topic in marketing right now. I think for a good reason though, just to kind of set the stage from bearish, it's overhyped to all the way bullish, it's going to change everything. Where do you kind of sit on that scale in terms of specifically AI's impact on contemporary marketing?
Sure. I mean, look, I'm super bullish. I don't want to be like over oxygenated about it. I like to think that I'm kind of realist, and I think it is realist to be bullish. For me, like the experience was like watching, as I think our whole industry sort of collectively watched ChatGPT and generative AI blow up on our LinkedIn feeds,
Yeah.
right, around the start of this year. And there was kind of an almost a doom scrolling aspect of it for me, because I characterize this as being like a Kasparov moment, which is Kasparov. Apologies for my accent, but Gary Kasparov is the Russian chess champion who famously lost to Deep Blue. I think he was one of the greatest human chess players that ever lived, and I think the experience is similar with generative AI, where what we're seeing is the computers, the machines, like encroaching on an area, an activity, a human activity that previously we considered sacrosanct, which
Yeah.
in this case is creativity. And I think our natural inclination is to root for the humans anytime the machines kind of encroach on our territory, right? Is we want to root for the humans. And what I was watching as I was doom scrolling on LinkedIn at the start of this year was like, oh, and I'm someone who's spent the last 20 years of my life like in creativity, in craft, in copywriting, in experience design. And I'm suddenly seeing there's suddenly a magic button for so much of what we have been doing and what we've been sort of striving to do for a long time. So when I say I'm bullish, I'm not. I don't mean to be flippant about that. I've been through this journey, and I'm still going through this journey in many ways of anxiety when I look at the power of these tools. But I also, the scales have fallen from my eyes. I don't think we should be. I don't think we should try and placate ourselves with platitudes about it, right? I don't think there's any point saying things like the genius of human creativity will never be replaced when we're seeing the machines getting closer and closer to replicating, to outperforming us in creative tasks.
So I've been thinking about this idea of real creativity, and I think creative as a sort of industry term is different than like deep human creativity sometimes. But if you take the most kind of truly kind of novel creativity that humans can produce, I do wonder. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I haven't seen anything from generative AI yet that didn't involve a seed of true, like actual still human creativity that ended up being good, right? Like there's a lot of like recursive, interesting kind of, iterative things. But do you think we will enter a world where the actual kind of ideation itself is coming from computers, or do you think that there is some seed of human creativity and generative AI is basically doing a lot of remixing, but that seed kind of can't be replaced? Or are you all the way on the side of like,
I'm all the way,
we
man.
just haven't gotten there yet? Like, but that's
I'm all the way. Yeah, I think this is why I was sort of saying it's like a Kasparov moment, because I think like, okay, we're not all the way there yet, but like when Kasparov lost to Deep Blue, that was a threshold moment in our relationship with computers, right? It was like prior to that, a computer could not beat a human being at chess for whatever reason. That was the narrative that we kind of glommed onto, that like symbolized our supremacy over our own tools.
yeah,
Right. And then it beats us, or it doesn't just beat us, it beats the very best one of us, possibly the very best one of us that's ever lived, possibly. And so like, yes, it almost doesn't matter for me that we're not seeing these machines go all the way in every case to like the actual conception of ideas, although we are. I want to. That's an important caveat for me. We
okay,
are seeing large language models generate ideas from scratch based on creative briefs that you would normally give to an agency team, that are certainly passable, and in some cases actually really rather good. So yeah, I guess it, I am bullish on that fact. I think we've passed that threshold, and how soon we get all the way there is almost secondary to the fact that like we're in a new era now where it's possible, where it's on the table, where it's really just a question of time for them to start doing it at scale.
yeah. That's a an unusual take, I think, because there is, and you mentioned this earlier, but there is this sort of general view in our industry that I think right now that yeah, generative AI, it can remix, it can do stuff, it can create more efficiency, but like the creativity part, that's still the unique domain of humans. If that's not the case, then where does this industry sit 5 years from now? Like,
That's
what does it
exactly
look
the
like?
question, right? That's the question, and a lot of a lot of the thinking right now is around like efficiencies like the efficiencies that you can get from these machines because you can automate parts of the creative process you can previously automate, and anxieties precisely around those efficiencies and that automation, right? Like, will it take away our creative jobs? How many of them? How deep will the cuts go? How far will it encroach on our previously sacrosanct human territory? Um, firstly, I want to be clear. I do not know where the advertising marketing industry is going to be in 5 years' time, and I don't believe anybody does.
Fair.
I think everybody's got some version of believing that we've seen this movie before,
Yeah.
right? Whether you think it's as important as the internet, or whether you think it's as important as the iPhone turned out to be, or whether you think it's, not to shit on the metaverse and part of me, but whether you think it's the metaverse where it's like something that was very exciting and felt within reach, and actually is probably much further away than we thought it was.
Yep.
I think most people are somewhere on a spectrum of all of those things in our industry.
I get where you're going with this. Basically, is it just another hype cycle? Are 6 months from now, are we all going to be going, oh, yeah, remember that AI thing? I
That's
guess
it.
that didn't really work out. Versus, like, is it going to change everything? And that was kind of how I initially wanted to bracket the conversation, right? But as far as all the people I've talked to and experts I've listened to, you're pretty far on the right axis, or on the right side of that scale, which is like, no, this is going to be incredibly disruptive. A lot of the core work that this industry has been built around humans doing on behalf of
Yeah.
clients is potentially all going to be done, better and cheaper by computers.
Yeah.
Clearly, there's a lot of smart people, in our company and other companies working towards kind of the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So, you know, where does this all go then? Or
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be
What's,
5 years, but like where, I mean, is it fundamentally something where agencies are just doing radically different things 5 years from now than they are today?
yeah, I think so I think it's going to change the foundations of marketing. I don't know if it will do it on a 5-year time frame, but when I was saying, I remember my train of thought from earlier. When I was saying, I think everyone thinks they've seen this movie before. We're all anchored on these previous
Yeah.
transformational changes that we've been through, and we think we're going to play out like the same thing again. And I there's this quote, I think it's by Nicholas Nassim Taleb, or Nassim Nicholas Taleb. Sorry if I've got that wrong. Which is like the future is not like the past.
Yeah.
The troubling thing about the future is nothing like the past,
Yeah.
right? So we
Yeah.
haven't seen this movie before. We haven't seen this kind of technology unleashed in a world, in an industry that looks like ours, is as mature as ours, and has a bunch of people already thinking about it, right? Like one of the famous beats about AI is it's being adopted faster than any technology adoption that we've seen before in our industry. Whatever it was, the internet took something like 15 or 20 years to reach like mainstream adoption. The iPhone cut that down to like 5 years or whatever. ChatGPT now has 100 million users registered.
Yeah.
So it's going faster than we've ever seen anything before. It's coming into a industry and a landscape that doesn't really resemble anything that we've seen before, because we've been going over the last 10 years, 15 years of our own digital transformation in this industry, where we've leaned more and more into digital marketing, into data, into that sort of workflow and that process. So no one can really anticipate what the disruption is going to look like. I can think of a few avenues that I think are really worth pursuing and interesting to pursue. And I don't think that this is the end of creative work, right? I don't think this is not the end of marketing. This is just the transformation of marketing. It's the transformation of digital that we're watching right now. So I think it changes, or it's going to radically enhance, in some cases, the capabilities of marketers and brands. You're going to be able to create, or we are already effectively able to create, content at uncapped scale. Right, so content that's very high quality, that's like what previously would be considered like the highest quality, was limited to like one campaign a year, or like one big idea, one big brand idea. And then the purpose of digital was to extend and optimize that big brand idea by like, okay, we'll change the call to action for this audience, we'll change the color of the button for that audience, whatever. I think what AI is doing in the generative and the content space is it's going to enable brands to uncap the idea of the big idea, right? You're going to be able to create a big idea effectively for every customer. Maybe every customer deserves a big idea. Maybe they don't. I think that's an area that we need to explore. I think complementary to that is the idea that marketers are going to be able to basically make much, much more accurate predictions about the signals of intent, about the levers of sort of buying behavior, about where purchasing happens in a journey, what triggers purchasing behavior, what triggers loyalty, what really unlocks lifetime value from a community, from a customer. And I think as we are applying analytical predictive AI modeling to data sets that brands are becoming increasingly sophisticated in how they're able to generate those data sets, then we're able to make much more accurate predictions about human behavior. So, sorry, long-winded way of saying, I think the capabilities of marketers and brands are going to improve exponentially, because we'll be able to make more accurate predictions, and we'll be able to fulfill on those predictions with creative, with messaging, with experiences at a scale and at a quality that we've never been able to before.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, and to your point, there's been this sort of trend, really, I guess, over the last decade plus of kind of imputing more and more customization, whether that's from a data standpoint or a creative standpoint or both, into the mix. The one side of the spectrum is the Super Bowl ad that 100 million people see, and they all see the same ad at the same time, no matter who they are. And then the other side is the more targeted Facebook ad, etc. But you're saying that kind of basically we haven't seen anything yet, that potentially we could get, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but potentially get to a place where almost every individual person sees different creative in the ad that they're viewing.
Yeah, I think that's okay. I think that's now possible, right? Like, as we've passed this AI threshold moment that we've kind of just gone through, and it's opened up a new vista of possibility in digital, right? And the promise of digital has always been personalized journeys, personalized advertising, understanding the actual effectiveness of every investment that you make in the advertising pipeline. And I think what AI is going to allow us to do is really fulfill on that promise of digital, right? Like we've got
Yeah.
some of the way there, but when we do personalization, it's very low resolution. So like I might tailor a message to a demographic. Like I might know the sex, the gender of the audience. I might know their age. I might know what
Yeah.
territory they're in. I might know broadly what affinity group they have, and I might know what buying signal they've just displayed online. There are very few data points in in that spectrum, right?
Yeah.
The analogy I was using was like, okay, say we know that the people I'm trying to reach are like, there's a reasonable chance that they're into music, right? Because so like we tailor our messaging around like music affinity, music lifestyle affinity. Great. Now, actually, because we're able to make higher resolution predictions about them, and we're able to understand them more intimately because of the interactions that we're providing for them, we can tailor messaging to what genre of music he or she might be into. Not just what genre, but like what band he or she might be into, and maybe even like beyond what band, like what artist or what band they're going to go and see this week. They're going to go and see tonight, and we can actually start serving because of AI, because we can generate content now where previously it had to be more or less assembled by hand. We'll be able to serve content that lives up to that level of data, right? That understands you at that high of a resolution. How much that's going to change your relationship, you the customer, with the brand, how much that's going to unlock in terms of like extra purchasing or extra value from each customer, we don't know yet. Like that's the
Yeah.
uncharted territory.
It,
But we know
it,
it's just become economically possible. Sorry.
no, that's great. It strikes me that this is sort of one of those opportunities that would have theoretically been possible 10 years ago if you had literally an army of graphic designers. We're going to hire 100 graphic designers to work on this one campaign, right? But no one would have ever done that because it was just so massively cost prohibitive. That basically we're talking about something that more or less the pipes are already built. It's sort of already theoretically possible. It's just that the input cost has or will come down so significantly that it actually starts to make economic sense to
Yeah.
do new creative for every, maybe not one person, but 100 people in a lookalike audience versus every 3 segments of 1 million people. So
That's the hypothesis, and I think the fundamental change that AI has triggered in our spaces, it's changed the economics of advertising, it's changed the economics of marketing. It's now certainly feasible to create content tailored to much higher resolution audiences. How much that actually affects conversion, that's the hypothesis that we now need to set out to prove.
yeah, because it's like, how granular can it get before there's just diminishing returns? Like,
Yeah.
Like how specific, if I like bass fishing versus trout fishing, if I see the red or the, slightly off pink version of the ad, like at some point, maybe that doesn't matter, but I clearly there's more room to run there in terms of, creating more customization, contextualization, et cetera.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think one more thing I wanted to say is I don't think any of that like negates this idea of mass storytelling per se as well,
Mhm.
right? Like I think we still, as a culture, we still want meta narratives. We still like, I want to be able to use the cliche, I want to be able to bump into you at the water cooler, and we both have seen Succession, or or we both know what's happening in politics at the moment, or like we all still want these meta narratives that we kind of live under. And I think brands are going to still have a role to play there, right? There's still going to be the mass channels. You mentioned the Super Bowl spot earlier. I think that is obviously like the archetypal mass audience channel, right? But like
Yeah.
one of the things that's interesting to me is like you can reach that kind of mass audience now via channels that were previously considered niche.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
via digital channels, right? Like Mr. Beast has got this great tweet where he says something like, it costs $7 million to just produce a Super Bowl ad or to buy a 30-second spot at the Super Bowl or whatever.
Yeah.
He's like, if anyone wants to reach 100 million people without spending $7 million, come talk to me, because he
Yeah.
regularly reaches 100 million people, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure this podcast is going to hit something like those numbers.
Oh yeah, it's Mr. Beast levels for sure. That's the bar we're trying to hit. No, I think it's a great point. I do wonder. in terms of that, the point you just made, this sort of idea that we still need or want these kind of mass, stories, these things that we can bond socially around. But I think it's fair to envision a world that's not too far off, where when you get into actual like video mediums, you could start to have a situation where the entertainment itself that you're consuming is customized to you.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the Black Mirror episode kind of similar to this, and I won't spoil it for people, but I do think it's not out of the realm of possibility that you could say, "Hey, I really like the show Always Sunny. I've seen all the episodes. Can you create a new episode for me that involves like surfing? Like let's do an episode where they learn to surf." I know that sounds like science fiction, but I think the speed at which this stuff is developing, are we going to be in a world where not only the paid media, but the actual just the entertainment that we're consuming is more or less completely customized to our likes, interests, and maybe prompts themselves.
Yeah.
Like we actually design it for ourselves and then consume it.
It does sound like science fiction, right? But if we were like to take the current incarnation of the internet and describe it to somebody in 1996, it would sound like science fiction, right? Like there's this awesome, it's Bill Gates, and I think he's being interviewed. I forget who he's being interviewed by, but he's on one of.
It's like one of the late night hosts where they're super skeptical. They're kind of making fun of the internet. They're like, "Oh, this is a bad idea," and he's trying to sort of defend it. Yeah.
He describes the internet, and the host is like, Gates is like, he's like, "I'll get all of my news via the internet," and the host is like, "Can I just pick up a newspaper?" He's like, I'll be able to follow the ball game by the internet." He's like, "Can I just use the radio?" Like it does sound like science fiction. So I read this really interesting thought piece the other day that was saying like maybe the next big shift in social media is actually less human participation, right?
Yeah.
Because participating in social media is actually quite a high friction experience, right? Like you've kind of got to want to be a creator on some level, even if you're just doing it at the micro level. It's a risk to post something. You might not get any likes, like, it might disappear into the void. You might be socially judged. And actually, it's a much lower friction, much easier experience, and still gives you the dopamine to just consume the content. Yeah. And we're already seeing bots on LinkedIn LinkedIn is using bots like ChatGPT to generate topics of conversation to try and generate posts to try and keep people engaged in the platform, right? Extrapolate that trend, we see a social media world where it's less like lean in and participate and more like watching the bots, like producing content, watching the bots fight it out over the topic of the day. Anyway, who knows? It does get a bit sci-fi, but it is within the realm of possibility now.
Yeah. I mean, this is maybe a little too much speculation, but I have to think we're going to live in a world 5 to 10 years from now where a significant amount of content on YouTube, Netflix, TikTok, take your platform of choice, is going to be AI generated, and most of it will be terrible, but the algorithms will be sophisticated enough to let the good rise to the top. And so, if you have a virtual unlimited production, scope, then it just keeps making content until it figures out what kind of resonates and what sticks.
And let's be honest, most of it is terrible today, right? Like,
yeah, it is.
One of my favorite expressions is quantity has a quality of its own, right? If there's enough content out there, it will find the right audience match, and one man's part of me is another man's goal.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. So one thing we haven't talked about in this realm is search. I mean, I think, and it's kind of it's a big question. It's a commerce related question, so it resonates with me in particular. But the majority of digital commerce starts with search, whether it's Google or Amazon or another platform. It is mostly someone typing into a search bar, looking for either a general thing or a very specific thing, or maybe even a need, not describing a product itself, but a need that then gets to a product. We've seen Bing testing this. Shopify has I think it's a GPT based chat bot. There's been rumors that Amazon's going to launch something. To be honest, I think the current experience leaves a lot to be desired. I still find that like actually just typing in a classic kind of search query is probably a better way right now. But that's been around for 20 years, and this has been around for 3 months. So I'm going to give it a little bit of slack. But I mean, assuming that the underlying models get better, the application gets better. What's your point of view on search and how it changes? And then as a follow up, like what do marketers do about this? Because everything is SEO based right now.
Search is the starting point, like you said. It's the commercial foundation of the internet in many ways, because all of our PDP pages are designed exactly for search, right? And I don't know, but I think there are some really interesting questions here. So I like that you had a measured point of view and how far you think the disruption will go in search, because I think that is an important question. It's one that we haven't answered yet. Is will ChatGPT, like AI-based search, be much different from what we already have, and will it be much superior to what we already have? Like, there's already so much AI in the algorithms behind search.
Yeah.
So I think the fundamental difference will be obviously, like, instead of the 10 blue links that everyone likes to rag on, the 10 blue links these days, and not to waffle too much, but that was another one of the big eye openers when ChatGPT broke. Was people realized just how kind of dusty search had become, right?
Yeah.
Like yes, it has innovated a lot.
This is actually kind of an annoying experience if I really think about it. Like, why does it take me 90 seconds to find this answer when it could just be
instant? But what is the answer?
Yeah.
Right. So like right now you're presented with like, yes, a list of options, and yes, it's possible to gamify what options get presented to you, and yes, advertising encroaches on them, etc. And I think the most obvious answer about the change in search from the user point of view is that the friction, we got the potential to remove the friction from the process, right? Yeah. So like, yes, obviously, like instead of the 10 links, and actually there are thousands of links, but the 10 links I might actually look at, and then I have to go into myself and like pass the pages and the websites that they take me to and figure out what it was I wanted to answer. Instead of that, I get the answer. Great. Defrictionalized process. Some big questions to ask about how marketing takes place in that context, but still, like, feels like an immediately superior process. I think the more interesting question is when you take the friction out of it, there's no way to do that without implying a point of view. Like the AI has a point of view because it's choosing what to show. It's choosing what the answer is. Yeah. And what the answer isn't. Well, what is the criteria by which it's choosing that? Well, it might be what it understands about your preferences and your profile, or it might be what the ROI is on a particular product for a particular marketer that's bought their way into the recommendation engine. And that's gonna play out in the tech space. It's gonna play out in culture. We'll see how that figures. But I think there's some really interesting tension in this idea of AI is going to force search to have more of a curatorial point of view. And we've already seen in our mediascape that people actually like that, right? Like, so like Walter Cronkite, I'm told, I'm a Brit, I wasn't around in his day, but I'm told he used to read the news fairly objectively, right? Yeah. And everyone like, this
happened at this time, and this person said this, and this happened, next story.
The quote unquote golden era of news, right? I guess.
Yep.
And that model seems so outdated today in a world where, okay, at one level you've got like the difference in point of view between a CNN and a Fox. But that's like still the mass media, right? You take it all the way down to the news feed and the algorithms that curate your news feed, and people are like in their own bubbles and their own wormholes, and they're just consuming the information that gets served to what triggers them and their buying behavior and their preferences. And AI, I think, is going to potentially exacerbate that. It's going to curate my search. My access to information is already not objective, but it's going to become increasingly biased towards the opinions that I want to hear. I again, speculating. I don't know, but I think point of view in AI could be the new interface, right? Like if you think about it, like, what is the bias of the AI? What is the point of view of the AI? What is the lens that it's curating information and product choices? That's how well does it know me? What does it think? What does it know what I actually want, or does it know what I think I want?
Well, I think that's a great point, because I think it's so easy to think about this technology through the lens of like, it's an AI. It's just like the
Yeah.
software, the AI that everyone has. And probably what, and I think you're making this point, but what people should absolutely consider is the fact that there may be lots of different AIs or one AI with different options within it to choose, do I have the factual one? Do I have the sort of biased one or unbiased one in my view of what is bias and what is truth and what is fact? And then do I have one that is my personal AI that knows me and knows my preferences
Yeah.
already? So that kind of gets like more like a personal assistant. And there's going to be this whole mishmash of different options when it comes to even how is the information itself filtered into a single answer. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I don't know, but this is why I'm bullish on the impact of AI in marketing is not just that it's encroaching on creativity, but it's that it's going to it does require us to reimagine a lot of the fundamentals of how we currently do marketing online.
yeah.
And there are going to be incredible opportunities that come from that disruption. It's hard to anticipate what they are, but any sort of big seismic change like this is going to throw up new models and new possibilities.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's going to be plenty of work to do, right?
Yeah.
It's just going to be different work than what's happening today. But I'm this whole sort of uh, technological unemployment thing. That is a cycle that's played out hundreds of times, and I think everyone is, and in fairness, worried about that, or a
Yeah.
lot of people are worried about that in our industry. And every time I actually look under the hood, though, on this stuff, I just go, there's a ton of work. It just looks different than it looks today. It's just different stuff, but you still need smart, educated, forward thinking people
I
to,
think we need people for a long time to come. I mean, like, and again, who knows exactly what the future holds, and I don't want to be glib about it because it is disruption. It is. We're going to see the change of a lot of the practices that we've built up over decades in some cases, but I think it's important to be clear about it when we're staring at disruptive force like this. I think it's important to be honest about it, and I think it's important to try to be unbiased as we're drawing our conclusions and try to not be biased by our own wishful thinking. Right?
yeah,
Like, I
yeah,
wish I wish that AI isn't going to be better at composing symphonies than Beethoven.
yeah,
Uh, but there's probably a pretty good chance it will be at
yeah,
some point, and it's already not that far from it.
yeah,
um, but yeah, I think like I'm in my middle ages. I'm not a young person starting my career. I'm not a young person starting my career as a copywriter. I was at one point a young person starting my career as a copywriter, right?
yeah,
Um, and I don't want to be flippant to those people because I think they are going to face an industry that's radically changing. But then I do want to say, don't be placated by platitudes, right? Like, don't be put off. Like, don't be told that the genius of human creativity cannot and never will be replaced, because we're already seeing the encroachment of machines on the genius of creativity.
yeah,
What you should be doing is looking for the opportunities that this throws up, looking for what this means you can do for your customers, for your boss, for your clients. What companies can you create? What solutions can you create? And I think there's going to be a lot more opportunity there than there is disruption, like, ultimately.
I think that's great advice. I mean, I think there's also this potential, apathy that people face. I think young people, and they go, well, everything's going to get automated, so it doesn't matter. I don't have to, and it's like, listen, every job is different than it was 5 years ago. Anyway,
Exactly.
like, it's not like a
Exactly.
job is a static, even if you have the same title for the same company, unless you're in a very stagnant industry. But if you're anywhere near where we play, like, what you're doing next year and the year after, even in the same role, is going to radically change every year.
Yeah.
So it's just more of that, right? Like, maybe faster now, but yeah, I
I
think
think
that's great perspective.
reinvention is the ultimate skill set, I think,
Yeah,
in this area, certainly in this industry,
yeah.
where you kind of have to, like, write a new playbook, like you said, like, on year cycles right now.
This has been great, Henry. Thanks so much for being on.
Thanks, John. I really appreciate it, man.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Nexus Project. If we referenced anything in terms of links, etc., they should be in the show notes. Make sure to subscribe so you get all the episodes in your feed. And if you wouldn't mind leaving us a rating or review, that would be super helpful. Last but not least, share this with a friend or a colleague that you think might get value out of it. and I will see you on the next episode.